Welcome to Record, Mix and Release, a YouTube series which takes you through the process of recording a song from beginning to end in your home studio and releasing it to the world. And in this episode, we'll be preparing for the mix session. Hi folks, I'm Mike and I hope you're well. And welcome to the 9th episode in this series where we record, mix and release a song to the world from a home studio. Now we've already recorded all of our parts of our song and we're eager to get stuck into the actual mixing. But before we do that, it's a very good idea to start preparing your DAW so that the mixing process is both smooth and easy. That involves naming, coloring, but also organizing your tracks logically so that you can really swiftly move through the process of mixing. Now, if you want to get notified about other episodes in this series, or indeed other episodes on this channel all about DAWs, home recording, gear reviews, plugin reviews, that kind of thing, then please do subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you get notified about my future videos. Now let's get stuck into some organisation. So I'm going to start off by organising some drums, but in fact I'm actually going to start off by deleting some drums, because if you remember at the beginning of the project I inserted a virtual instrument, this Cakewalk SI drum kit, and I used that as a custom click track. Well, I don't need that anymore because I won't be recording anything else, so I'm going to delete that. Now before I do, I'm just going to open up this synth rack here. This is the place in Cakewalk where the virtual instruments live, and when I delete it I just want to make sure the actual virtual instrument is deleted from memory as well. So I'll right click on that, click delete track, and I'll get rid of that, and it has indeed disappeared from the synth rack. That's great, I've freed up some resources. So I'll collapse that, and in fact I'm going to collapse this side panel as well so that more and more of my interface is dedicated to actual mixing. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the actual drums to organize them. So I'll go down. Now if you remember, the drums that I used were Addictive Drums 2. I inserted the virtual instrument and it created one stereo output, which you can see here. Now there's a problem with that, in that if I'm actually in this environment and I'm going to mix and I think, well, I just want to make the snare drum a little quieter, where do I do that? I can't easily reach for the fader for that. In fact, I have to just open up the plugin and adjust the fader there, and that's not very convenient for me. I don't like to do it that way. So what I'm actually going to do is create an output for each of the drums to an actual channel on the console down here in Cakewalk, so I can easily adjust the levels when I want to. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I do that in this particular plugin, Addictive Drums 2, by clicking on this arrow and selecting a separate out. Now it's going to be different in each plugin, of course, so you'll need to look at the manual or what have you, or a YouTube video about how you do that in your particular plugin. But this is going to actually create a separate output for each of the drums and the overheads, the room mics, etc. Now there's a couple of important things to be aware of when you're doing this. First of all, how is the signal chain working? So is the fader still affecting the actual volume of the drum? So is the fader in the plugin affecting that? Now I can tell you with Addictive Drums 2 it isn't. It's now bypassed that fader, so that's not going to have any effect, which is good because I actually just want to control all the actual volume down here. And the other thing to be aware of is often on these plugins, when you go to a drum, they've got some kinds of effects processors on them. So this kick drum, for example, has this compressor on it here and this EQ, etc. So you want to be aware of whether those things are still in the signal chain, and I can tell you with Addictive Drums 2 they are. So if I could still use this EQ here and affect the sound, but I'm not sure that that happens with all plugins, so you want to double check that. Now it may be that you don't want to use these particular effects, and you can switch them off here, and then you would go ahead and use whatever effects you prefer in your actual effects inputs or sends down in your DAW. So it's worth being aware of those things. So now I've created a separate output for each of those drums. If I go to a section of the song where there is drums, I'll go here and I play, you won't be able to hear any drums at all. I don't buy what I've been sold. And that's because I haven't actually created any channels on the console in Cakewalk to do that. Now the procedure is going to be different for each DAW, but here in Cakewalk I'll just go and I'll insert an audio track. And then for the input, I'll name it first. Let's call it kick. Then for the input of that audio track, I'll go down to here and I can see Addictive Drums there. And then that gives me a list of all the outputs from Addictive Drums. So I'm going to select the kick output. and my kick drum is now going to this channel. So I'm going to solo that, and then let's just play it. And you can see the kick drum coming out on that channel. Now in Cakewalk, I can choose an icon for it, which is rather handy. So I'll go ahead and select a kick drum icon, and that's that one done. And then I simply need to go through with each of these drums, create a new channel, and then just double check that the sound from that drum is actually coming through that channel. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that, but I'm not going to let you watch that in real time because it's not that interesting. So I'll kind of speed up the video, and then I'll catch you on the other end. Okay, so hopefully now you can see that there's actually a separate output for each of those drums on different channels in Cakewalk here. So now when I play the track at that point there, let's just find the actual point, which is good to play from. Yeah, we'll do it there. I don't buy what I've been sold. The happiness is meant. So you can see all of the signals coming through those different channels there. And that's the basic organization of the drums. Of course, I'm not actually mixing them yet. We'll get to that a little bit later. So in a traditional recording environment, we would perhaps record the bass guitar with a signal direct in, which is what we did ourselves, but we would also mic up a bass cabinet as well, and perhaps mic up the room as well. Now I don't have that luxury because I don't have a bass amp nor neighbors that would tolerate it. So I just plugged my bass guitar straight into the audio interface, and I'm going to use an amp sim. But I still want to maintain the kind of mixing characteristics of the older way of doing it, meaning I want to have one channel which has the dry bass sound, and also another channel which is going to have the amp sim bass sound as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. It's going to be different in every DAW, but this is just for Cakewalk, but you can probably follow this principle. I haven't seen a lot of other people do this, take it or leave it, but I just find I like this way of having it organized. So on my bass guitar channel here, I'm just going to go up to sends and create a new send, and I'm going to select a new auxiliary track. So I'll click on that, and that creates a new track right next door to my direct bass in there, and it's there where I'm actually going to add in my amp sim. So I'll do that now, and the amp sim I'm using is Amplitude 4, so I'll select that, wait for it to load up, taking a while, there it is, and then I'll go ahead and I'm going to select a bass setup. So I'll go to Amplitude Bass and select the solid state bass preamp, rather like this one. The first thing I'm going to do is just turn the reverb down on that. And then I'm kind of ready to go. Now I'm actually going to set up my sound a little bit off camera because it takes a little bit of concentration for me to do that. But it's a great little amp sim this. You've got your actual amp there. You've got your cabinets which you can choose. You can also move your microphones around, select different positions for them. You can choose different rooms to record in, all that kind of good stuff. And I'll be going through that a little bit off camera to set up my sound. But I want to show you the basic principle now. So now when I play the bass guitar, I'll just solo both of those tracks. So I'll solo the direct in bass and the amp, and I'll play them. Now I've got a fader here which can control the amplifier, and I've got a fader here which can control the dry bass signal. Now there's a problem there because as I moved the fader down and turned down the dry signal, it also turned down the amp signal. So I need to make sure with this auxiliary send that I'm doing a pre-fader send. So I'll just flick that switch off there, and now I can control them completely independently. So I'll turn down the dry signal. I can still hear the amp, and there's the amp, and I'll turn up the dry. So what I'll eventually do is select my actual amp sound. I'll move around the microphones and the room, etc., and then I'll blend those two signals together, and I may adjust that throughout the mixing process. So when we come to doing our initial static mix, I'm going to suggest that we work as quickly as possible because your ears soon get fatigued and you lose objectivity. So it's very, very difficult to do that when you've got this many tracks. We're already up to 61 individual faders in our console here. Now, let's say I think at some stage the drums are too loud. They need to come down a little bit. It's not very practical to then go through every single drum here and just tweak it a little bit like this. You're just going to lose your workflow, and you're very, very quickly going to lose objectivity, as I say. So it's handy to be able to have one fader where I can just control, say, the drums overall, or the choir, for example, is another good example. The choir's too loud, turn it down. So in order to resolve that problem, we're going to create stereo buses for the sort of main logical chunks of the instrumentation. So we'll take the drums as our first example. Now here in Cakewalk, there's a specific way of doing this. It will be different in different DAWs, but all of them, as far as I'm aware, can do this. So I'm going to go ahead and select the first drum, which is the kick drum, and I'm going to hold shift and select the last drum, which is this drum effects channel. So I've got all of those selected, and then in Cakewalk, holding down a control, I'm going to select the output for those drums. So I just need to do it on one of the drums, and I'm going to select new stereo bus. Now that creates a new stereo bus, which is right down the end here, bus D, and all of the drums are now routed through to that. So I'll go ahead and I'll rename that to drums. How creative. And then I'm actually going to color it now as well. And it's a really handy part of Cakewalk, that when you color the bus which everything goes to, it changes the color of the tracks which go to it as well. So I'm going to go for orange for drums. I don't have a particular way of colorizing my tracks particularly, just whatever I feel like in the moment. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, or just as an example, is the choir. So I'll just go to the choir. Again, I'll select the first one, go through to the last track of the choir. So there's 12 all in all there. Again, I'm holding down control on the keyboard in Cakewalk. I'll select an output and go for new stereo bus. And all of these outputs from each channel of the choir go through to that new stereo bus, which is bus E. And again, I could just go ahead, rename that to choir. And then I'll recolor it. Let's make it, I don't know. Yeah, let's make it purple. Fine. So, of course, I'd go through and do that for all of those major chunks. Now, some of them are a little less obvious than others. For example, it's not really big, but the bass guitar, as we know, did go through to two different channels, the bass guitar and the bass amp. So I would make a bus for that. But the less obvious ones are really like the single instruments, where you've got things like, let's look for an example here. Let's go for, say, the piano there. Now that comes through on a stereo channel. I'm actually going to send it through to a bus, and I'm going to call that piano. Now the only reason for that is that just means that I have a fader up this end, which sits with all of my other main faders, because eventually what I'm going to end up here, as a guess, is around about 8 to 9 faders, and that's where I can do the overall control of my mix. Now I'm going to quickly go ahead and do that for the different sections of the sound, and then I'm going to speed up the video so you don't have to watch all of that, and I'll see you on the other end. Okay, so if we now look at the bus section of our console, I'll just drag it all the way over here. So we're looking just at the bus section. You can see that now, to control the overall mix, I have a lot less faders to manage there. And each of these faders now relates to a sort of a rational group within the mix. So I find that makes things a lot quicker. Now, a little bit more housekeeping I'm going to do here. First of all, there's a couple of channels in this area which I don't need, the metronome channel, so I'll just delete that, and I don't need the preview channel, so I'll just go ahead and delete that. And now I'm just going to change the order of these channels a little bit so that that there's some sort of sense to that. Now, what order you do them in is sort of up to you, I suppose. There's no real hard and fast rules with this. One thing I do like to do is, for example, keep the bass guitar fairly close to the drums, because they work closely together. Of course, I'll keep all of the different vocal groups together, you know, the harmonies, the choir, all of those kinds of things. So here in Cakewalk, I can do that just by dragging things around. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I just hold Alt on my keyboard, for example, and I can grab the vocals and I'll drag them over to the first position there. In fact, while I'm at it, I'm just going to grab this master channel and I'm actually going to drag that all the way to the end, because that makes much more sense to me. I'm not quite sure why Cakewalk like to put it on the left hand side, but anyway, I guess some people like it like that. So as I say, I'm going to go ahead and drag those around. I've got my main vocals there. I'll go ahead and pull my other vocals down near those, for example. I'll go ahead and do that, and I'm also going to set up some icons on these channels as well. You've seen me do that before in the tutorial, so I won't demonstrate exactly how to do that. I'll speed up the video and I'll see you at the other end of that. Okay, so now what I have here, if we just move this all the way over, looking at the end section here of, up all the way up to my master fader, I have these sort of logical groups of faders. So starting off with the vocals, say for example, vocals, harmony vocals, the break vocals, which are the female vocals, choir. So I've got all of those together in the first 4 channels of buses there. Then I've got my main guitar, a backup guitar, bass guitar, cajon, drums, percussion. So the bass is, as I say, grouped with the cajon and the drums because they work closely together. And then I've just got my keys as sort of more miscellaneous items at the end there. And all of those colors relate obviously to the colors in the main track view, and they're also in the same kind of order as well. I had a little shuffle around there. So I've got my main vocals here and I've got my groups of vocals here, which that controls. So that is going to make the final mixing process a lot smoother, and it's going to enable me to move quickly to make major balance changes within the mix. So I just want to quickly talk about organizing the track view. So if I just get rid of the console for a moment, here is my track view, and there's lots and lots of things on there. This was mainly a tool for recording and composition, so I won't be using it so much anymore. I'll roughly be using it to navigate, to listen to different sections of the song. Now, you could have done this earlier. I'm going to do it now. I'm going to organize some of these things into folders just to condense it all down a bit, making it easier to navigate. There's lots of different ways of doing this, or different times you could do this. As I say, I could have done it as I went along. It's probably a good idea to do that. I didn't happen to, but I'm just going to quickly do it now. So the way I might organize this, for example, is I've actually got as I said earlier, I recorded my verse parts for my main vocal, the chorus parts, and the outro chorus parts separately. So I'm just going to go through and select all of those tracks there which relate to the main vocal, and I'm just going to right click here and move them to a folder and a new track folder, and that just pops them all in that folder, which I'll call main vox. And that's that done, and then I can collapse that down. So I can go through next, and I think I will actually do, let's have a look, all of the harmony vocals. So I'm just going to go through, select all of those all the way down to there, right click, and again, I'll move to, if I can find it, move to a new track folder, which I'll call harmonies. Right, let's not call it harmonies, let's call it harmony vox. And that's fine. So you get the idea there. I'm just going to go through and organize all of my tracks into folders now, and I'll speed up the video and I'll see you on the other end. Okay, so as you can see, everything's now in folders and I've condensed it all down. So I now get a nice just overview of my whole song. I can quickly and easily, I can see where different sections come in. I can quickly navigate using the markers which I put in at the beginning. So I'm ready to kind of easily navigate around the song using the track view. Thank you so much for watching this episode in the series. In the next episode, we will be doing some gain staging. Now, if you liked this video, then you can show your appreciation by hitting the like button. It really does help me out. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you're notified about other episodes and content from this channel. And I'll see you in the next video.